This conference will now be recorded.
Fine. Now, we've been discussing about a lot of concepts in there, right? Like, let's say, how do you deploy a code onto a server, and how do you make sure to install something called as an IIS, and how do you make sure that your server is always backed up. And we were also discussing about concepts like disaster recovery and all these things, right? So all these two are to make sure that your servers are redundant in nature, meaning your servers are fault tolerant, your servers are up and running all the time, and just in case something happens, you always have a backup copy of your working server, a working copy of, let's say, your server, which you can take it up and running in, let's say, within like very short span of time, and the customer is happy and all that stuff. But when you are looking things from an architectural perspective, now we are talking really about the architecting of solution, guys. So even that is very, very important when, let's say, when a decision is asked from you to, say what kind of a solution we want to design and all that stuff. Now let's imagine that you are, you know, uh, creating an IIS server or a Windows server basically for a company like Facebook. Okay, let's imagine a very hypothetical scenario that you are creating, let's say, a Windows server for a company like Facebook. And what you did is that, what you said, okay, fine, I will create the server, and you say, you fine, you will get a new resource group out here. So let's say VMHA, high availability, and you are now starting to create a server inside it. You said, okay, fine, Windows 2019 server, because I can go ahead and install IIS on top of it, which is like great. Now you said, okay, fine, this is like great. I'll say this is VM2. This is like, a good zone like East US2 or West US2. So I'll take an East US2 and I'll say, okay, fine. This is what I am actually looking at right now. Availability options. This is something that we haven't discussed yet because it is certainly not a right point to discuss it in between, let's say, the backup class. So now it says, you know what? You need to architect your solution. Like even if you go on this I, right, it says, you know what? Architect your solution to make sure that it's always a high available. I mean, it's always available to your customers. Meaning, no matter how many people visit your website and all that stuff, you should make sure that your machines are highly available and all that stuff. I'll say, okay, great. Now, what are the availability options that I can actually go for? I click on this drop down, and now it has like one is in preview. Do not have to like discuss about it. We have something called as an availability zone and an availability set. Now I say, okay, fine. I don't know which option is right for me. Now, how do I choose it? Now, how do let's say I decide about it? If you are confused about it, the answer is in documentations. As in when I click it, it will now tell you what are availability sets, what are availability zones, and all that stuff, which is great. Like one of the options to go ahead and, let's say, visit that particular website, and you can go through all those details and all that stuff. Great, fine. But what exactly happens if you don't select it? Like what exactly happens if you don't select it is like something like this: creating a server, and this server, right, or basically this particular virtual machine, right, will get created on some different server rack. Okay, now I'm talking about a server rack. So it's a set of servers and one server rack out here in a data center called EastUS2. Now this is, since we are creating an EastUS2, we'll just say the data center name is EastUS2 out here. I'll say EastUS2. And your machine is created and you have like deployed IIS, you deployed your code on top of it. It is working great, fine, all good. But how does Microsoft manage all these servers in the backend? Is that Microsoft stacks up basically a bunch of servers, like let's say about 10 to 20 servers basically. Like this is one server rack. I'm talking about 10 to 20 server racks in that way. and they attach it to one particular power source. Power source, meaning it be a generator, whatever it is. It be a switch, it be something, everything. So a set of server racks, okay, a set of servers or a set of server racks together are bundled up and given a common power source. It's just like, you have like multiple speakers and you just attached everything to one particular power source, because that's how it is logical to do. And these servers, right, they internally communicate with each other. So all these servers like that are stacked up to the same power source use a common router switch, because they need to communicate with each other. So they need a router basically to get communicated. So you have a router switch basically that is common to a rack of servers. So you have a common power source and you have a common router or switches basically, using which all these servers sitting in the same power source can communicate with each other and also communicate with the other servers. Similarly, you have again this particular server rack is again representing 20 like this. Since there is no place here, I did not really go ahead and put so many out here. So something like this, and this is attached to a different power source, and this has a different router switch and all that stuff. This is great. Now, like this, you have multiple server racks, multiple power sources, multiple router switches, and etc. Like this is how the logical division actually goes on when you talk about, let's say, servers and all that stuff. This is great, fine. Now, the issue with this particular model that I'm using is that I said Microsoft that, you know what, I actually don't need any redundancy because I want to save on my cost. So I don't want any kind of redundancy. Please go ahead and just create, wherever you want. I said, okay, fine, just create wherever you want. Microsoft said, okay, fine. I will give you a provision and underlying server out of, let's say, like multiple servers, and I'll just create this out and give it to you. It's attached to a common power source, common router, all that stuff. Great. And I've like hosted my application. The customer is using it. I put on backup, recovery. I did everything. I had everything basically, and I did everything, which is great. But let's imagine if this power source gone bad. It's a physical infrastructure, right? It has its own wear and tear. Let's imagine this router is going bad. Let's imagine that on that particular day, this particular server is gone down because the power source took a hit. Like something happened to your power source, it went down, it took your servers also down. This machine is down again. Now, definitely you have a Azure site recovery enabled. You have a lot of stuff basically that is enabled out here, which is great. But for everything as such, you need a downtime, right? Now, when we did an ASR, it took us 5 minutes, and then we had to go ahead and attach a public IP to it and all that stuff. Now, 5 minutes, or let's say it like if you attach all these things, and it'll take like about 10 minutes or something like that. 10 minutes is billions of dollars lost for a company like Facebook. Now, I am not talking about a small company. I'm talking about a very big company, like a giant like a Facebook. And imagine Facebook going down for even a minute. People are out there on Twitter telling that, hey, you know what, Facebook is down and all that stuff. Now, 10 minutes is a very, very huge time for Facebook. Now, Facebook doesn't want to do this. It doesn't want to take such a kind of a risk. It says, Microsoft, I don't want to do this. I'm not comfortable with this idea that I only have one server and I am like putting it somewhere like, on some backend server out there. And just in case the power supply goes down and all that stuff, I'm not protected with this particular with this particular eventuality. I'm not protected with something like this. Microsoft says that is the exact reason I'm giving you something known as an availability option. This is the exact reason why am I giving you something known as a availability option out here. Let us take this as VM1. I'm giving you something known as an availability option. You can make use of it. So Facebook says, okay, great. I'll now take availability set. Microsoft says, okay, fine. You'll have to create an availability set, meaning this is a resource that you need to create. And this is a region specific resource, guys. East US 2, so your availability set can only be in East US 2. And let's give a name to the availability set. It says AV set 1. And now Microsoft is asking you how many fault domains do you want and how many update domains do you want? Now, what is this exactly? What is a fault domain? What is an update domain? Let's look into that. So normally, right, in general English, a fault, right, in let's say in a geography term, a fault is nothing but a crack. They say there's a fault in the rock. You might have an earthquake, meaning there is like cracks on the rock, so you might have earthquakes, landslides, and all that stuff. Fault is nothing but crack, meaning fault here is representing physical damage to the servers in the backend. And update here is representing a scenario when Microsoft patches the servers or updates the servers in the backend. In the backend, if Microsoft updates it, it uses something known as an update domain. Then how is, let's say, the logical arrangement of all these things out? How do they logically arrange it is something like this. Let me see if I have a image for that. Let's say availability sets. Okay, fine, great. Okay, something like this, but to make it more clear, right? Something like this. Now I have fault domains. Now I have how many? I have like two fault domains, or let's say I'll put in 3 here. I have 3 fault domains, which is the maximum. So I have F0, F1, and F2 out here representing my fault domain. So let's forget about F3 out here because we do not have, let's say, the third one out there, like the third fault domain out there, fourth fault domain out there, sorry. So F0, F1, and F2, and this is the arrangement of the fault, meaning the fault domains, right? Let me take that pencil out here. Now fault domain 1 or fault domain F0 has the servers 1, 5, and 9. Fault domain F1 will have the servers 2, 6, 10. Fault domain 2 will have 3, 7, 11. So I am basically just, let's say, arranging them in this particular order. And 159, since belonging to the same fault domain, are attached to one particular power source. Let's say this is P1, power source 1, and they have the common switches, common routers, and all these things out. And in fault domain 1, right, F1, you'll have 2, 6, 10. These are the 3 servers that get attached to the same power source out here, having their own set of power supplies and all that stuff. Similarly, fault domain 2, F2, has 3, 7, 11 inside them attached to the same power source. So what am I doing logically is that Microsoft is logically placing them in a vertical order and saying, you know what, 159 is great, 2, 6, 10 is like in a different way, 3, 7, 11 are attached to one different power source. Great. Now imagine in a hypothetical situation that power source 1 goes down. If power source 1 goes down, right, this particular server, this particular server, this particular server aren't available. They are down. But 2, 6, 10, 3, 7, 11, they are available because they belong to altogether a different fault domain, right? Now Microsoft says, great, this is great right now. But I also have another condition where I update, let's say the servers. I update the servers. So what I do is that I update, or basically I arrange my servers into something known as update domains. So Microsoft says, okay, fine, that is fault domain is great, but these are update domains that I have, U1, U2. So Microsoft says, you know what, in update domain 0, like in U0, I have server 1, server 2, and server 3. in update domain 1, I have 4, 5, and 6. In update domain 2, I have 7, 8, and 9. So we totally have how many? 9 servers. That is something that our assumption. Now, just in case Microsoft rolls out an update, Microsoft will first select the update domain 0. They'll say, okay, fine, I caught the update domain 0. Now I'll update servers 1, 2, and 3. So they will not be available during that particular point in time because I am updating it. Once this is done, once the servers are up and ready, once the servers are up and running, now I'll move to a different update domain, which is U1. I will target 4, 5, 6 now. Great. Once this is done, once the servers are back up, I'll go to update domain 2, which has 7, 8, 9. These three servers. So Microsoft is going to proceed with their updates in this particular order. And that's the reason Microsoft has divided the entire data center into the update domains and a fault domain. Fault again is for physical, wear and tear. Update is for Microsoft for rolling all these updates out. So this is how the order, or this is how Microsoft kind of arranges all these things out. Guys, any questions still here, guys? Anything? Is this clear?
Yes, actually, what exactly update domain means? Means
So,
is it just rack server or?
so update domain is nothing but, let's say, a set of servers out there. And if Microsoft just says an update domain, right, meaning it's considering all those servers out there for one particular update. Meaning if I roll an update, I'll update it to all these particular servers lying in the same domain.
Okay.
Does it answer your question, Sanjay?
Yes.
Updates means nothing but a maintenance task, right?
Patches, yeah, maintenance and everything, exactly.
When it happens, crack only it will update.
No. So like what will happen is like updates are very periodical. They are like very regular. But cracks, right? This physical wear and tear, that is not that regular. It's not that particular regularly. It doesn't happen that regularly. But just in case if it happens, Microsoft basically says, you know what, this is how it will happen. Like 1, 4, and let's say some other server will get affected if this particular power source is down. But updates are periodical.
Okay.
Does it? Yeah.
Yes, regular process. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a regular
Uh,
process. Yes.
do we need to define the name or the something U1, U2 like that, or how it will
No,
take?
this is internally defined by Microsoft. What
Okay.
we need to define, or what basically we need to basically do, is we need to tell Microsoft how many update and how many fault domains we want. What is the arrangement that we want? For example, I'll take a 3 cross 3. Meaning what I have right now is that I have 3 fault and 3 update domains. Something like this arrangement. So Microsoft says, okay, fine. There are 9 slots for you that I will allocate, like 9 slots and 9 different server racks belonging to different fault and update domain combination. Now you can go ahead and create this out. This is what I'm telling Microsoft. And you can just click on this. It says, you know what, virtual machine, the same fault domain, share the same power source and physical network switch. Virtual machines in the same update domain will be restarted together during a planned maintenance. Azure never starts more than one update domain at the same time. This is what Microsoft is actually telling you. And one very important thing, guys, is that you will have to decide whether you want an availability set or whether you want any kind of an availability option in this page only, like during the creation only. After creation, you cannot attach the servers into an existing availability set. You cannot do that. So you'll have to create it here, and you'll have to attach the servers here only before even it is created. So I am saying, okay, fine, I need a 3 cross 3 combinations. I'll say okay. So it just took a logical name and it said, okay, fine, I will, you since that you want me to arrange like it's a 3 cross 3, meaning 3 update domains and 3 fault domains. I will give you something like this particular arrangement with 9 slots, and now you can use it. So I'll say, okay, fine, great. Now it is VM1 that I want right now, which like D2S and something like this particular memory. And I'll say give a ID, give a password, and the rest of the process remains the same. So we just said, okay, fine, ID, password, all these ports are good. Then let's open up port 80 also. And let's say next, networking, next, just table this out, next, and review and create. So it's now running a validation. And now when I create it, right, I will also get an availability set during this creation. So it will understand that what the user wants to create an availability set. So what I'll do is, like, firstly I'll go ahead, create the public IP, all these things out. And even before I create a virtual machine, I'll create an availability set in the backend for my logical understanding, and I'll place that particular virtual machine in that particular availability set. I'll say, okay, fine, I'll place this virtual machine out here. So let's see, after once this is getting created, let's see how it looks like. Now if you look the order, right, it has firstly created something known as an availability set out here. It said AV set 1. This is one the user wants me to put it in. AV set 1 is the one. And now I went ahead and created the public IP, network, the security group rules, everything, and etc. And finally I'm creating the virtual machine. And while creating the virtual machine, I will attach this particular virtual machine to the availability set and make sure that this is what the user's option and all that stuff is. Okay. Any questions while the virtual machine is getting created, guys? Anything that I can take?
Yeah, in the fault domain scenario, so once the fault domain 1 is down,
Okay.
so the the VM will be automatically forward it on fault domain 2, like that.
No, that is not the concept. So here what happens is that, let's say if I'm creating a VM right now, okay. So let me take the diagram of the virtual machine out here. Let me make it a bit small. You're creating a virtual machine right now. And let's imagine in a hypothetical situation that this virtual machine is placed in this particular row. This particular row belongs to what? Now this is update domain 0, right? This is U0, U1, U2. This belongs to U0, right? So this server would be called as U0F0 because it belongs to a row or a rack called update domain 0 and fault domain 0. This is one arrangement. Like, you have just created one machine, put it here. Microsoft says, okay, fine, I'll put it here. Now Microsoft says, you know what? If there is an issue with this, it is not my responsibility to take the server and switch it over to, let's say, a different one. Rather, this is your architecture which should decide. Meaning, if you want to get protected by something like this, go ahead and create another server, which is the same replica copy of it. Put it in a different, meaning Microsoft will automatically put it in a different update in a fault domain if you use the same combination. So let's even see that how it looks like and all that stuff. Microsoft will say, okay, great. Now you have created something. I'll put it in a different combination. This is the same thing. See, it's an update domain 0 and fault domain 1. Now, if you put, if you take a third server and put it somewhere out here, this would be update domain 1, fault domain 2. Microsoft will start identifying your servers like this. So the responsibility of placing your servers, the number of servers that you want, is completely on you. It's not Microsoft will take care of it. Microsoft will give you a combination where you can place things out. Does it answer your question, Chandra?
Yes, but we are dealing with only one VM now. So
No,
in this scenario,
in this scenario, if you're dealing with just one virtual machine, right? Even if you go for an updomain domain or fault domain concept, the SLA of Microsoft will not get applied for you because you're just dealing with one virtual machine, and you're just what do you say? You just want to, let's say, make sure that this one virtual machine is up and running all the time. Certainly, yes, you can go for ASR, you can go for backups and all these things. But if there is an issue with this particular power supply, your machine will be down. Your machine will be completely down out there because you only went for one combination out here. And when I click on this and when I come down to availability and scaling out here, it says, you know what, you have an availability set. If I look into my availability set, it says, you know what, VM1 is up and running. It's placed in fault domain 0 and update domain 0. Like this is the only virtual machine there. If this particular combination goes down, there is no way that I can help you out. That's what Microsoft is telling you right now. Is that okay, Chandra? Yeah.
How can we overcome this issue? Then?
We can overcome this issue by placing or by creating multiple virtual machines, not one, but multiple. And this is exactly what happens in an organization. If especially you are, this is a production workload, you will not have one server, you will have multiple servers running the same code placed in the same availability set. So let me demonstrate that to you all. Right now I have one server. I'll say, okay, fine, you know what, I do not need just one server out here. I need multiple servers out here, and I need multiple servers that are, let's say, running on this particular machine. And just like, when you are creating a different machine, right? I just want to do one quick thing out here. I just want to make sure that I install IIS on top of the server. And I had a PowerShell script, if I remember. Just a second. Where is my IIS install? Yes, great. Let me edit this out. This will help us in the later demonstration. So come on. Just put it here. Just run this out. And it will be running in the backend so that we can now go ahead and create a new machine right now. So right now I have placed just one machine in my availability set, which is AV7. Now it's a very good question to ask, is that how can you really overcome this particular scenario? Now what am I going to do right now is that I'm going to create another virtual machine in the same region in the same availability set. Now I'll say it is VM2. I'll take the same resource group, which is VMHA. I'll say it is ECUS2. I'll say it is VM2. And here, if I had an image of the VM1, right, I could have just taken that image out. Simple enough, right? But I don't have an image, so I'll say, okay, fine, not a problem. I'll just anyways go ahead and create it out. I'll say availability set right now. And now I'll select the availability set that I have created earlier. I have created an availability set called AV set-1. I'll say, okay, fine, Microsoft, I want to use the same combination right now. I want to make sure that I use the same combination right now. So let me go ahead. Let me say test user. Let me say Microsoft-001. Let me say same thing like ports open. Next, next, next. Management, I don't need boot diagnostics. You can save time on this. Advanced and review and create. Now what am I doing here, guys, is that I have created an availability set out here, and the first availability set, like the first virtual machine, went ahead and sat down in an availability zone or in an availability option called F0 and U0. Okay, got it. I just missed the screen. Okay, great. Fine. So the first virtual machine that I was like working with went ahead and sat, let's say, in an area or in a place called U0 and F0. This is the first machine that went ahead and sat there. Now, what am I doing is that I'm reusing the same availability set. I'm making sure to reuse the same availability set. And I'm saying Microsoft, or I'm rather telling Microsoft that, hey, you know what? The next server that I'm going to place right now, please place it in the same availability set. Microsoft is going to identify that, hey, you know what? You already have, U0 and F0 out here. Now, what I'm going to do is that I am going to place the VM2 in a different combination so that you are protected right now. So how many servers, the guys, that you can place out here? Any guesses? Like I've created VM1, VM2 in the same set. Any guesses, guys? Like how many more servers that I can put it in?
Total it is 9, right? 3:3.
Right, 3:3. That's the combination.
Okay. 3 servers.
Okay, so 3 as in like, 1, 2, 3. Okay, but you still have what, 6 slots out here.
Okay.
Okay, so you totally have 9 slots. You can place how many? 9 servers ideally,
9 VMs.
right?
Okay.
But the thing is, you can place how many of servers you want. The maximum that I saw per a subscription is like 100. So you can even place 100 servers in the same combination. Now the first 9 would be placed something like this. The first 9 are going to be something like this. Now when you're talking about the 10th server, right? The 10th server will be placed here back again. The same rack is going to be reused again. This is how the combination, or this is rather the combination how Microsoft gives you. So how many of the servers that your subscription allows you to, kind of create in that particular region, you will be able to go ahead and place all those servers, or you'll be able to go ahead and place all these things, or you'll be able to reuse rather the availability set that you have created. This is the concept what Microsoft gives you. Now if you look at this thing, right, it got created, great. Now if I go into the availability options right now, I'll say availability, I'll say okay, find the same availability set, and now see guys, I have 2 servers. The first server got placed in update fault domain 0, update domain 0, which is this fault 0 and update 0. Second server got placed in what? Fault domain 1 and update domain 1. Fault domain 1, update domain 1. This is my second server. Microsoft is now placing your servers this way. It's making sure that what your servers are placed logically in this order, and it's making sure that it is spread across your availability across your availability sets out here. Does this make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're designing an architecture for a solution, this is something that you need to for sure consider, that how many copies of the same server am I going to create. And this is, guys, especially very true for projects and clients for whom the production based workloads are very important. Like money, yes, you kind of spend a lot of money with this particular model, but you are protected. But very importantly, you are protected out here. Meaning, if let's say your fault domain now, let's say in a very hypothetical scenario, your fault domain 0 is going down. What did Microsoft do is like, even fault domain 0 is going down, you have another server which is running from fault domain 1. And in all my years of experience, I've never seen a power source like, kind of going down. Like I had servers that are going down for about 10 seconds or 20 seconds because of some updates and stuff like that. But power source and all these things, this is something which is very critical, and Microsoft places it like, in very, very high tables and stuff like that. So I have not seen this going down, but what we do is like we create multiple servers, replicas of multiple servers, and put it in the same availability set as such. And the maximum number, like, one of the popular interview questions is like the maximum number of fault domains you can have is 3. 3 are the maximum number of fault domains. Maximum number of update domains are 20. Maximum updates are 20. So it's a 5 cross 20 combinations that you can have. So totally a combination of 100 slot. Right now it's like 9 slots, right? So you have a 5 cross 20. So you can have, let's say, 100 different combinations of things out there. This is how Microsoft kind of gives you guys. Is this okay? Like any questions here?
Sorry, can you
If
please
I'm not
repeat that? Sorry, maximum update domain is 20, maximum fault domain is 3 or 5. I did not get that. Sorry.
Sorry, 3. It is 3. Sorry, it is 3. It is 3 cross 20. Sorry,
So is it 60 or 100?
60. Sorry, I
Okay,
by mistake I said it is 5. It
no
is
issues.
3. Yeah, 3 cross 20.
Okay. In our case, if we take 3x3, how much we can create that? You told.
So you have 9 slots out here, and
Okay.
in this particular slot, meaning for example, your first server VM1 is sitting here, okay?
Okay.
VM1 is sitting in what? Fault domain 0, update domain 0. VM2 is sitting in fault domain 0, update domain, sorry, fault domain 1, update domain 1. VM3, if you create it, right, it will sit in something called 2, 2.
Okay.
If you create the fourth machine, okay, you are done with all the 3 fault domains. Now it will again create 0 and 3. If you have, let's say, a third update domain, it will reuse this combination. Let's say you are done with 9, you're creating a 10th one. VM10 will again sit in the same combination of an update and a fault domain. Does it clarify things out?
Yeah. It means in this case, fault domain 3 is to 3. How many we can put it?
How many virtual machines you mean?
Yes.
So if your subscription allows you to create, let's say, 100 virtual machines, you can also put in 100 virtual machines here. There is no
Okay.
restriction as to how many virtual machines, how many are the maximum virtual machines. It depends upon how many virtual machines are allowed by your subscription. So you
Okay.
can put them, you can place them out here, and that will get divided into, let's say, this combination, like probability and combination again, right? So it get divided into this particular combination out here.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. But what if my entire data center goes down? Like, very askable question is like, what if I am planning, my architecture, I'm just planning my solution out here, and I made sure to create 9 different servers out here, like 9 different servers that are sitting in, let's say, 9 different, you know, uh, update and a fault domain combinations. I thought I was protected, but what if, let's say, my data center goes down? Microsoft says this is the exact reason I am giving you an SLA of 99.95 if you create your virtual machines in something known as an availability set. Rather, I would suggest you to create it in something known as an availability zone. Availability zone is a combination of 2 or 3 data centers which are in the same zone connected to each other physically and also virtually with network, switch, wires, and etc. And you can make use of the zones. It's called zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. Microsoft says, hey, you know what? Pick the zones, meaning if let's say you want 3 different servers, put the server 1 in zone 1, server 2 in zone 2, server 3 in zone 3. I am good with that. For such a kind of a combination, meaning if you are going for an availability zone, the SLA, if I'm not wrong, should be somewhere around 99.99. The SLA what Microsoft offers is like 99.99 as compared to 99.95 in an availability set. But again, one condition here is that if you want to go for an availability zone, the region that you're selecting, right, that should support the availability zone. Our first class back again. The region that you select should support what? A region pairs. Like we had something called regions and region pairs, right? So not all the regions will support availability zone. For example, let me do one quick thing for the demo. Let me also run a script on this particular server so that this is also up and ready. So I will also discuss what am I doing with this and all that stuff, right? So we'll discuss this out, guys. So right for now, I'm just like to not make sure that I don't waste time. I'm just like running this out to make sure that we have this ready for our demo. So what I was telling very importantly is that when you're creating a server, right? When you're creating a virtual machine, it's very important to choose a region that supports a concept called an availability region or a region pairs. So let's say if I'm creating in central India, okay, I'm creating let's say somewhere in India, I say okay fine, my availability options, I don't have an availability zone at all, because this particular region doesn't support, or this particular region doesn't have multiple data centers in the same zone. This will become an issue. That is the exact reason why you guys would see a lot of projects out there, right? A lot of projects, like wherever you like, kind of, in whichever project that I especially dealt with, I've seen people going for regions like East US, North Europe, West US, where you have something like an availability zone getting supported. Now you have something called as an availability zone out here, meaning this particular region supports a concept called region pairs, supports a concept called region pairs out there. And when I select availability zone out here, right, all I need to select is which zone I want. So I say zone 1, I create something called as a VM3, I create it, and VM4, right, it'll get created in zone 2. I will select zone 2 while creating VM2. So I will have virtual machines right now arranged technically in 3 different zones out here: zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. 3 different zones out here. I want to make sure that I arrange these virtual machines here, so that if one zone is down, right, I have 2 other virtual machines that will help me out. Another popular question is that, can you have a combination of both availability set and availability zone? Answer is no. You cannot do that. You can only go for either an availability set or an availability zone. You will not be able to go for a combination of both of them. So which one is better? The answer is before you. Availability zone, of course, is the better option to go for. Now the thing is, this is good, this is great. Now I'm not creating an availability zone. That is something that I'm leaving it to you all guys. So in the place of an availability set, select the zone and select zone 1 and zone 2 basically, while you're creating 2 different servers. That is the only thing you need to do out there. Now this is great, fine. But in our case, right, we created 2 virtual machines, VM1, VM2. We made sure that the same code is there on this particular virtual machine. Same IIS server, same everything. Code 1, code 2, everything, like the same replica, everything. I put the same thing out. And I put them in the same availability set in my case. Now, what I want is that I want a mechanism somewhere like this. Like, as of this point, my customers, right, or my clients, whoever are visiting this particular website, let's say this is facebook.com only, are coming to VM1 only, because this is the public IP that I've given to them, and this is how I expose my website and all that stuff. They are coming, they're looking into this website, they're shopping, they're doing a lot of stuff. Great. Now, what if the number of people are more, not 1 but 1,000? This VM virtual machine, right, even that is running on a CPU. That CPU can only take so much of load. What if that fails? Or in my case, what if the server goes down because it went into a fault domain? But I said Microsoft that, hey, you know what, I also created another virtual machine. Now what I'll do is, like, I'll take a 10-minute downtime and I'll say, okay, fine, this is not the public IP, this is the public IP right now. This is a different one right now, because even this virtual machine has a different public IP, right? I'll say, okay, fine, I'll give this one to you. Now people, please wait, I'll give this a public IP to you so that you can access the second server that I have. Now, isn't this a bit illogical to do? Like, the very reason that you have so many servers is that if one goes down, I do not even need my client, or do not even need my customer to understand or to basically realize that something has gone down. I need my business to carry on irrespective of whether the server in the backend is down, server in the backend is up. I don't mind about it. Meaning I need a mechanism to divert this traffic to both the servers. I need a mechanism to manage this out. And that is where exactly, or the exact reason, you have a resource called as an Azure load balancer. Introducing something called as a load balancer to you guys. So load balancer is a device. By the name itself, it balances the traffic that you have onto your virtual machines. So here I have two different virtual machines, VM1 and VM2, sitting in the same availability set, and I will place something known as an Azure load balancer in front of it. And the customers hitting this particular load balancer, right? The traffic, I mean, the first request will go to VM1, second request will go to VM2, third request will go to VM1, fourth request will go to VM3, sorry, VM2, and so on and so forth. Meaning my requests, meaning alternative requests are hitting alternative virtual machines, and this mechanism is called as a round robin. Is called a round robin fashion. This mechanism, what is being implemented by the load balancer, or the load balancer works in a mechanism or works in a logic called as a round robin. Meaning take the first request, give it to VM1, take the second request, give it to VM2, third request VM1, fourth request VM2, and stuff like that. So it'll do an even odd. If you have a third virtual machine, first request will go to 1, second request will go to 2, third request will go to 3. Stuff like that. Now, this all makes sense now, right? If my virtual machine, or if one of the power source goes down, one virtual machine is down, my load balancer will understand that, hey, you know what, this particular virtual machine is down. I should not divert the traffic there. I will now start diverting the traffic to the available healthy virtual machines in the backend. This is what we place out there, guys. Guys, any questions with this, any questions with this diagram, or any questions with this topic introduction, anything?
Which means VM1 was down. What happens?
So VM1 is down, right? The request will automatically go to VM2. So you do not have to, manage anything. Your load balancer will take care of it.
But even if it was down,
Even VM2,
yeah, VM2 was down then. Both were
then there
down.
is no issue. Then there is like, no other alternative. If both are down, then that particular day your business is down. Like, very simple answer to that. So that's the reason
Okay.
we create, let's say, like about 5 or 6 servers and put it behind a load balancer, put it in the same availability set and do all that stuff. Or even your different availability zone. Even better. Like, you have 3 different availability zones out there, and you went ahead and load balance your traffic, and your traffic right now is being diverted or being played around between 3 different availability zones out there. So what then, or how then can I go ahead and create a load balancer? So just like any other resource in Azure, I can actually go ahead and say, oh, fine, I need a load balancer. And I can say, what it now tells me, what kind of a load balancer do you want? Do you want an application gateway, an Azure front door, a traffic manager? What is it? I want a very simple load balancer. I'm good with that. So I'll say, okay, fine. I'll create a load balancer. I'll say I need the load balancer in the same VMHA. And I'll say this is like load balancer public. Now it's telling me, okay, what type of a load balancer do you want it? Do you want an internal load balancer to manage your internal traffic? Or is it something like an application server? In my case, it's an application server what people are visiting out. And I want to basically go ahead and, let's say, do an application server out here. So I will say it's a public load balancer. And for now, let's take a basic load balancer. I'll explain what a standard load balancer tomorrow. Let's take a basic load balancer. And one very important thing, guys, is that we are now going to configure the load balancer. I'll say, great, this is good. This is also good. Fine. Let's hypothetically look at this right now. So I have 2 different virtual machines out here. And I have installed IIS and all that stuff out there. If I go and visit this particular IP, I have something like this. If I go and do something called default.html, sorry about that. I have, this is server VM1. In the same way, I have something like a virtual machine 2. which is running on a different public IP, different than this, because each and every virtual machine has its own public IP, right? So I'll say it is default dot HTML. This is VM2. So I just put a IIS on top of it, and I just put a sample HTML page on top of it. And when I ping one of the servers, it says, okay, fine, this is VM1 and this is VM2. Great. But for a customer, for an end customer, I just have to give one IP, right? Because here it doesn't make sense to have multiple IPs out here, multiple public IPs out here. What companies do generally is that they don't assign public IPs to these machines at all, even if they are public. I mean, even if they're, let's say, application servers. Rather, what they do is that they assign a public IP to the load balancer. Can you assign a public IP to the load balancer? Yes. Your public IP will be assigned to the load balancer, and as and when the virtual machines are attached to this particular load balancer, right? The virtual machines take the public IP or inherit the public IP of the load balancer. Now let's see how it looks like. Now just observe VM1 or VM2 rather is sitting on a public IP called 137.116, something like this. Same way, VM1 has a different public IP altogether. VM1 as such has a different public IP altogether. It's 20 something like this. Now what am I doing right now is that, oh, I close that page, okay, fine. I'll just go ahead and create a new load balancer out here. So I'll say load balancer, and I'll say create a load balancer, and let's go through the configuration while creation of it. So I'll say the load balancer name is load balancer public. Selecting the region called East US 2 because load balancers and the servers should be in the same region for them to get unattached. I'll say it is a public load balancer. For now, I'll go ahead and say it is a basic load balancer. This is the first page of it. Then it says what is the IP configuration. Okay, fine. I'll just give a VMHA. Now it says what is the IP configuration of the load balancer, meaning since you told me that it's a public load balancer, I need a public IP attached to it. I'll say, okay, fine. The public IP attached to it is something like, the name is something like public IP load balancer, and I'll say create new. And here I'll say this is like a public IP, PIP, LB, and I'll say it's like it's a, it's a static assignment. I'm good with that, and I'll say add. And I just did a basic public IP to a basic load balancer. Now it says, okay, great. I got the public IP. Like this is something that I got. But can you give me what are the virtual machines that you want me to get attached to? That's where the configuration of something called as a backend pool comes into picture. Backend pool just tells you or just asks you that what are the virtual machines that I need to divert my traffic to. Now I'll say, okay, fine, add a backend pool. Now I'll say the name pool name is like pool1. Virtual network is, why isn't this virtual network getting reflected? Let's see. Okay, VMHA, why am I not getting this one? Okay, where did I create this load balancer? Oh shit, where did I create the load balancer? Just give it a refresh. I don't think this page basically got refreshed since we created that particular virtual machine. So refresh it and again create this out. So VMHA name is load balancer public load balancer basic. IP configuration is basically is add a front end IP. Say this is LB IP. I'll say this is fine. This is, or I'll just say this is create new, and I'll say this is like new IP. Say okay. Say add backend pools, and I'll want to select the virtual network that I have here. So I'll say backend one. Why am I okay? Backend pool only comes to one more. Okay, let's see. Okay, strange, very strange. Same East US VMHA, East US 2, which is great, which is also the same thing, and which is also a virtual network that is available. Not sure why this isn't picking up the virtual network that is created out there. It's not even showing up a virtual network basically that is there. Backend pool, and you want to basically make sure that this pool gets attached to this particular virtual network. Let's try. No results are found. Okay. Not sure why this is acting up, guys. I'll have to see why this is basically behaving this way. So give it me a second. Let's close this window out. And VM2 is basically having this one, which is great. VM1 and VM2 are sitting in the same region like East US 2. Having a public IP, which is public IP is static assignment. It's okay, dynamic assignment, that's okay. Let me check this out. Let me say fine, it is VMHA. Let me say it is J. Let me say it is East US 2 out here. Basic. PIP LB. Okay, not a problem. I'll just create a new one. I'll just say this is public IP load balancer new. Say okay. I'll say add a backend pool out here, and I'll say this is pool 1. Now it is getting reflected. So there is some bug basically, and very importantly, you will have to have the load balancer and the virtual network in the same region. So East US 2 is where I went ahead and let's say created this particular load balancer. Earlier also I went ahead and selected East US 2, but there was some bug in the UI which is not reflecting out here. So I'll say this is the virtual network that I want you to get associated with, and I need you to get associated with the virtual machines inside this particular virtual network. So add, and these are the two virtual machines that are there in my backend. I'll add this out. So what am I doing here is that I said, you know what? I have a virtual network under which I have two different virtual machines. And I will now go ahead and add these two virtual machines into the backend pool. And I'll say add this out. Now it says great, I have two virtual machines. Now tell me, how do I divert your traffic? Now tell me basically, how do I basically divert your traffic out here? So for which you need to configure something known as a load balancing rule. I'll say it is rule 1, HTTP traffic, IP version is IPv4, front-end IP will be the front-end IP of the load balancer that we created. It says to be created. I'll say protocol is like, fine, this is TCP. I'll say port is 80 if there is a traffic on port 80, because HTTP is what I'm looking at right now. Divert it to a port called 80 in the backend to a pool called pool 1, where I have all these servers. It says, okay, great. But how will I know these servers are healthy? Like how can I basically understand the servers are healthy? For which I will configure something known as a health probe. Health probe again is a different device inside the same load balancer, and load balancer uses a health probe in order to check whether the machines are healthy or not. This is the mechanism what load balancer does, guys. So I'll say it's a health probe, configure a new one. The name is a health probe sample. I'll say protocol is TCP protocol, port 80, and check this for every 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds, go to the machines and check if they are alive or not. If they respond back with a 200 OK status, consider them to be healthy. Otherwise, take them out of the pool. This is how load balancer kind of does. And now you can also go ahead and give the interval as 10 seconds, or for me it is like 5 seconds because I just want to show a quick demo. So 5 seconds is a good interval. And for every 5 seconds it'll go and check whether the machines are alive. If there are two unhealthy responses, it will consider that that particular machine has failed and it will remove that machine out of the pool. So I'll say, okay, this is the health probe that I want. Session persistence and all these things we do not need that. I'll say add. So health probe is added. Outbound rules not required. Tags, review and create. So what all that we did basically while creating the load balancer. So firstly, okay, just a second. Firstly, one of the most important things that you need to understand is that the load balancer and the virtual network should be in the same region. Load balancers are regional in nature. They are regional in nature, meaning you can only attach virtual machines that are in the same region as the load balancers are. And one very important thing, guys, this is a basic load balancer in nature, meaning you can only attach virtual machines sitting in the same availability set. You can only have virtual machines sitting in the same availability set getting attached to this particular load balancer. You cannot have virtual machines sitting in a different availability zone, though in the same region, attached to the same load balancer because of a nature of basic type. And when we meet tomorrow, we're going to discuss something about a standard load balancer, which can help you attach virtual machines not in the same availability set, like a scenario of an availability zone. Now, what am I doing? I am load balancing my machine sitting in the same availability set, guys. And what all did I configure? I configured the public IP of a load balancer. I configured something known as the backend pools. I attached my backend pool to, let's say, two different virtual machines. And I did something known as a load balancing rule. I gave a sample rule called port 80. If the traffic comes to the load balancer at port 80, which is HTTP traffic, divert it to the backend pool at port 80 to the to the pool called pool 1, which will have like three different servers out there. Sorry, three different servers out there, and two different servers out there. And I said have a health probe which will constantly check all these virtual machines. Now I have my load balancer ready, which is called VMHA and all these things out, and it has the public IP attached to it, just 20.110.64.248. My virtual machine one had initially a different public IP, right? If I refresh my screen out here, can you see this? It's the same public IP now getting attached to my VM1 also. And if you look at the VM2, even this has the same public IP as the load balancer is. This is how the load balancer kind of inherits its public IPs to this particular virtual machines that are attached in the backend. This is how the load balancer understands that these are my children and this is how I need to divert my traffic. Now, if I do this, let me pull this out. Let me take the load balancer's IP. Let me go to a new tab and let me say default.html. Says this is server 2. First request went to server 2. If I use an incognito window out here, VM1. Second request went to VM1. Now, what if VM1 is down? Or what if VM2 is down? So let's generate a scenario where VM2 is actually down, meaning one of your, let's imagine that one of your fault domains has went down, or one of the availability set has gone down, and this particular VM is like going into a stop state, like it is unhealthy. Now, if you look at this, right, VM1 load balancer has immediately identified that, you know what, this is VM1 basically, and no matter how many requests are coming in, I will divert it to VM1 only because VM2 is down. That's how I identified it. And this is the main purpose of the health probe, guys. This is the main purpose. Is the reason behind we have a health probe out here. So very importantly, the basics of it are you have a basic load balancer, a standard load balancer. Basic load balancers can only be attached to servers or virtual machines that are sitting in the same availability set. Standard load balancer gives you much more additional options to attach it to, let's say, servers that are sitting in different availability sets as such. Availability zones as such. And load balancers are regional in nature. You cannot attach a load balancer to two different servers running out of two different regions out there. You have a different traffic mechanism for that, which is called as a traffic manager. We'll see what is that also in our coming classes. But for now, do you all have any questions, guys? Anything?
Yeah, since we use the same public IP for both virtual machines, the load balancer will convert. How can we access if you want some modification or to access that virtual machine?
Which is a great question, which is a lovely question. I love it. Now you have something called as an inbound NAT rules. This is something that we will see tomorrow. Is that the question is both the virtual machines have the same public IP? Then what if I want to do an RDP into it? What if I want to change something into it? What if I want to, let's say, go ahead and let's say do this and say test user hyphen Microsoft something like this? You won't even firstly be able to do an RDP into it. You need to configure something called as a NAT rule. NAT is an acronym for Network Address Translation. We will see what our NAT rules are, how can you configure it and all that stuff. And it threw me an error right now telling that, you know what, I cannot connect and all that stuff. This is called NAT rules and all that stuff, guys.
Okay, and in real time, we always use public IP to access the virtual machines, or will they convert any networking to access local IP?
No, you in the real time, like if it's a public server, right now it's a public server, like for your application is a publicly accessible application, then you need to expose out a public IP for sure. Like you need to have public IP for sure so that people can reach out to your application out there. But if it's a private application, like meaning if it's not an internet application and if it's an intranet application which is only used inside your organization, in no case you'll be able to use a public IP out there. We'll also see that scenario in something called as a connectivity, which is after load balancing, like after high availability, we'll go into a topic called connectivity and we will discuss about all these things, Sanjay.
Okay, and last question regarding Health Pro,
Mhm,
when it check if it is server is or one machine is not
mhm,
available, will it
mhm.
generate any alert kind of thing, or it will
So
just
you can have
log?
alerts out here. Like right now, I haven't configured any alerts. You can have alerts out here telling that if the health is down, then shoot out an email or send out an alert and stuff like that. Like you can have, but you need to configure the alert separately.
Okay. Okay, and sorry, one last question.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
You're running the commands from the console itself, right? So any
Correct.
kind of commands we can push it, or how,
Any kind of
without
PowerShell
logging?
commands, you'll be able to push it out.
Okay,
Like
without
any
logging
kind of,
in.
yeah, without logging in, you can push it out. Not only this, there is also called a concept called as a custom script extension. We will also discuss about it. Like for now, please log into the machine, configure an IIS, and just change the IIS. Like, just, just for the identification, just for this particular demo, just mark the IIS as VM1 and VM2. Like just mark that picture. But we will be talking about a concept before we head into, sorry, connectivity. We will talk about a concept called custom script extensions and the run command that is there in the virtual machine.
Okay, yeah, thank
But
you.
you do not have to have a public IP to log into the machine. You can manage it using this particular command, like this particular console, right? It'll directly interact with the C drive of the machine.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any questions, guys?
You run some script, right? What was that?
Sorry, I run.
You run some script, right? Our default script. So
Right.
what was doing?
So what did I do, Akila? Is that so that's what I was telling Sanjay right now. Is that for saving the time right now, that to not make sure. I mean, to make sure that I don't waste time going into the RDP and then connecting to that machine, installing IIS, and then doing all that stuff. I just went into the virtual machine and I said run, and I had a command with me. If you want, I can send that command out to you all. If you all want to try it out, you're more than welcome to do it. I just took a simple PowerShell to install IIS and to put a file in place, to put a basic HTML file in place, which will say which will give out the name of the computer if you do the IP/default.html. This is what I did. So you can take this command out and you can come here into the run command, go into the PowerShell, and you can place this command and execute it out. You can place the entire command and execute it out. So this command, Akila, is a PowerShell to install IIS. Without manually doing it, I went ahead using a PowerShell and did it out. Like I pasted this particular PowerShell in like the message chat window. So if you guys are interested, you can go ahead and use this also. You're more than welcome to do this also.
Is there any concept of multiple LBs? Because the LB gone down.
Like multiple load balancers? No. The point is that if you're going for, let's say, a basic load balancers, then no. But if you're going for a standard and a global load balancing, then yes, you can have a concept. But that is something that we will see tomorrow. That what do you mean by a global load balancing and all that stuff?
Okay, should we put all the VMs on the same VLAN, or we can put in different VLANs VMs into the load balancer?
VLAN, VNet, you mean, is it?
I mean, virtual network, yes.
No. So I mean, see, the thing is that load balances are very regional in nature, meaning if you have, let's say, a virtual network in East US 2, okay? Meaning I have a virtual network, let's say in East US 2, I created a virtual network and I created a different virtual network in East US 2. Like my VM1 is sitting in VNet 1, East US 2. VM2 is sitting in VNet 2, East US 2 in a different address space. You can still go ahead and attach those two machines to the load balancer, provided both the virtual machines are sitting in the same availability set. If I am using a basic load balancing. If I am using a standard load balancing, then you do not need the option to go ahead and put them in the same availability set as such.
Okay. Okay.
And one load balancer can manage only one application, right? If we have multiple applications, so we need to use multiple load balancers.
Meaning, let's say you have a facebook.com and a google.com and all that stuff, right?
Yes.
So in that case, right, you can define a load balancing rule. That's what rules are for. I had one rule for one application. I can create a different rule for a different application, expose a public IP for that rule out there. So for a rule, you again need a different public IP out here. And I can say if this is the port, then map it to this particular backend pool. And that backend pool will be running on a different application as such. So you can have multiple load balancing rules for them.
Okay, subjected, all those websites should be in same virtual machine sets, right? Hello. Am I audible?
Guys, am I audible now? I'm sorry, I had a power cut.
Yeah, you're audible. So subjected, those websites should be in same virtual machines, right?
Correct. Subjected, the website should be in the same virtual network.
Okay. Yeah, got
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any
Is there
further
any
questions? Yeah.
health probe for LB?
Health probe for ILB, like you mean the entire ILB?
Load balance.
No. There is no health probe for ILB, but you can configure alerts for ILB. Like you can configure for the alerts for the complete load balancer. if the load balancer goes down and etc., you will kind of get an alert and stuff like that.
Okay.
So any further questions, guys, before I close it for today? Okay, guys, so please practice this concept of load balancing and also in a combination with availability set. And you're more than welcome to go ahead and try out a standard load balancer also. We will any which ways be discussing the standard load balancing tomorrow in our class. For now, I did a basic load balancer. But you are encouraged to go ahead and try out a standard load balancer. But in case if you are doing a basic load balancer, right, please make sure that your virtual machines are in the same virtual network and share the same availability set. Only then you will be able to attach the virtual machines to the load balancer backend pool. Or otherwise it'll start throwing error telling that what the NIC cards are, like the NIC cards are in different availability set. I cannot go ahead and attach the load balancer. Please try out, let's say, a standard load balancer and all that stuff. Okay, guys, then if there are no further questions, then I am good for today, and we can meet tomorrow at the same time, and we can discuss more on this topic.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and have a great day ahead, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks.